fellow veterans. My name is Gary Ferguson, founder and CEO of Pathways for Veterans, a national nonprofit. I am honored to be host for this evening's event of Veterans Helping Veterans Television. Let me start by acknowledging my friend Cheryl Schaefer, a Vietnam-era veteran who created the Veterans Helping Veterans TV network, along with her team here at MidPen Media Center, for making it possible for me to share my story while serving in Vietnam and my return to civilian life. First, let me start by presenting a few facts. In August of 1966, I was drafted into the United States Army. All I knew at the time was there was a war going on in Vietnam and very little else. Like our veterans who served their country after January 1st, 1973, I had very little choice. Veterans who served after January of 1973 all have one thing in common. They all volunteered to serve their country, willing to risk everything, including their lives. There is a major distinction between being drafted and volunteering. Those of us who were drafted had to make a decision considering three possibility outcomes. The first outcome was to say yes. The second outcome was to say no and go to jail. And the third outcome was to flee the country. Veterans, on the other hand, who volunteer, just say yes, and they step forward. There was nothing to consider. They just do it without regard to their personal well-being. That's the character of the men and women who are currently protecting America and our way of life today. I have a great deal of respect for them, both men and women who have volunteered to serve our country today. There is no greater gift that one can give another than their willingness to risk their lives for them. My intention tonight is that by sharing my military story with you, that you may experience some similarities in your own story, and as a result, be willing to reach out and share your story with a fellow veteran, some of them who are still suffering from their military experience. There's one thing I've found over the last 30 years working with veterans, is that by sharing their stories, they're relieved from the pain of their past. I have broken down tonight's episode into three parts. Part one, what the hell happened? Part two, what it was like to return to civilian life. And part three, what it's like now. During part one, within several hours of being drafted, I was sworn in and found myself on a plane headed to Fort Bliss, Texas for basic training. Over the next 8 weeks, my drill sergeant took a 19-year-old boy and transformed him into a 19-year-old young man. Without a doubt, basic training was mind-altering. I went from everything being about me to everything being about my buddy, my company unit, my purpose through the mission while protecting my country and the freedoms we all enjoy. Simply said, in 8 short weeks, I had grown up with a new sense of purpose to serve others. Many of you watching this video know exactly what I mean when I say to you, you create new friendships and bonds that ultimately last a lifetime. Prior to basic training, I had no sense of discipline, let alone any self-discipline. Basic training was step one of a 4-step process. Step two took place during my advanced infantry training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Even after basic training, I had no idea what was in store for me. During my basic training, I'd started to feel more like a man than a boy. And AIT training was about to develop the man. My increased training regimen suited me well as I began to develop both my physical strength and my endurance. During the new skill sets that became an 11 Bravo combat infantryman was exhilarating to say the least. At the end of 8 weeks, I had become a force to be reckoned with, still having no idea what I was about to become. Those of you watching this video that have personally experienced combat know exactly what I'm talking about. And those of you who haven't seen combat can only imagine what it must have been like. Step 3 was my development, which happened within 1 week of graduating from advanced infantry training. When I landed at Ben Hoa Airfield in South Vietnam, I've never forgotten waiting on that airstrip for my final in-country deployment to my new company unit, which was Company D, 1st of the 5th Air Cav. Within 8 days of arriving in country, I would find myself constantly being shot at by an enemy that I could not see. No amount of training can prepare you for this kind of experience. Your training, if you can remember it, merely provides you an opportunity to be shot at again, and later, during the same day or maybe later that night. Step 4, I identified as how much experience in actual combat you can achieve without getting yourself killed while trying to survive. During the first 2 or 3 weeks in country, I only experienced small arms fire with a few mortar and rocket attacks at nighttime. Although I'd experienced minor combat with the enemy early on, these experiences were superficial and resulted in a very low body count with only a small number of arms recovered. That would all change on March 16, 1967, when I was awarded our nation's 3rd highest medal, the Silver Star, for gallantry in action. From that day forward, my entire military career took on a life of its own. Day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment, my actions were influenced by an unseen and irresistible force that would ultimately consume my very existence. The sensations I'm experiencing during that day was the ultimate high. Within 6 weeks of being in country, I started to become addicted to the high of being in the state of fight or flight. As I navigated the outcome of life and death decisions, those of you who are watching this video who know what I'm talking about will better understand what I'm about to say now. I'm now in Vietnam for less than 60 days, with over 300 days to go before I can rotate out of country and back home. Now addicted to the high that comes from combat, my situation started to become unbearable as I searched for my daily fix. The sickness began in my stomach and grew stronger with every combat mission and every kill I was responsible for. In an effort to numb the pain, I resorted to alcohol and unprescribed medications between missions to find peace of mind. The sickness that began in my stomach eventually took over my soul. As I became addicted to the search and destroy missions and the outcomes that gave me my new sense of purpose, I had become a killing machine. By now, I had also become addicted to alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and other non-prescribed medications, including morphine, to feel normal in hopes that I would survive my next mission. This vicious cycle went on for over 364 days before I rotated out of country and back home. During my tour in Vietnam, in addition to the Silver Star, I was also awarded the Bronze Star for heroism, the Bronze Star for meritorious service, 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Air Medals, a Combat Infantry Badge, and a handful of other medals that I don't remember, even what they were for. Having survived over 40 air assaults into hot landing zones and 47 night ambushes, I became more than a seasoned warrior. I became very dark with the sickness of the soul that was now manifesting deep inside of me. For those of you who would like to know more about details about my actual military experiences, my stories can be found in A Good Day to Die and downloaded for your free copy a portion of my military service, as told in my book, A Good Day to Die. A Good Day to Die is released in November on Veterans Day of this year. After returning home from this year in hell, what happened to me in the killing fields of Vietnam would now be locked away deep inside of me and become my darkest secrets. Part 2 of this episode. What it was like to become a civilian. I made a decision that I would never tell anyone what I had done during the war because of what they would think of me. Now having requested an early out from my military service, I returned to school under the GI Bill. I continued to struggle. The sickness I buried in my soul continued to manifest despite my best efforts to hide its symptoms. While going to school, my daily use of drugs and alcohol started to subside, and my cold sweats, anxiety, stress, and insomnia became less frequent. I started transferring my drug addictions to being focused on my school studies and the pursuit of a new career. These focused efforts soon produced the desired results when I was hired as a local city fireman. Something good finally materialized when I needed it the most. Perhaps something good has finally come after all the killing and destruction I was responsible for. I was now given a new purpose, that of saving lives rather than taking lives. The next 7 years, from the fall of 1970 to the fall of 1977, proved rather peaceful. My night terrors were less frequent as I focused on becoming a good fireman, in hopes I could atone for my out-of-control behavior during Vietnam. I was starting to settle down a bit and fell in love and married my first wife, and the American dream started to unfold. Within a few years, that beast inside of me started to rear its ugly head, and my use of drugs and alcohol started up again. Without medication, my dark secrets started leaking out from my soul body into my behavior, and I would soon find myself without a job and purpose. A veteran without purpose is better off dead. Within 9 months of losing my job, I found myself facing charges for assault with a deadly weapon. That weapon was, of course, me. I had no on and off switch. In the spring of 1981, I entered a 30-day inpatient treatment program at the Palo Alto VA, seeking treatment to avoid going to prison. Mentally, I was now back in the killing fields of Vietnam with no hope of redemption. After 30 days, I was released with no difference in my thinking disorder, other than being clean and sober. I'll never forget being told that there was nothing the VA could do for a guy like me. I was in the grips of the symptoms of P.T.S.D, and that manifested into a disorder. Without some form of medication, the diagnosis of P.T.S.D symptoms was not available until 1986, some 5 years later. The years between my losing my job as a fireman and my ultimate downfall was marked by daily risk-taking activities, including extreme sports, reckless driving of motorcycles, and of course, barroom fights. Barroom fights became my drug of choice. There was nothing like having the crap beat out of you so you could feel the pain. Feeling the pain on the outside of me was the only thing that gave me relief from the pain going on inside of me. Go figure. My consumption of alcohol increased to unbelievable levels that would result in 3 drunk driving tickets within 1 month. On December 2nd, 1986, I experienced my first death experience. During a drug-induced drinking blackout, I found myself buried under 3 feet of snow with no way to move, having pissed my pants and frozen. Now, this state of hypothermia, my conversation with God resulted in my returning to life. With all my addictions of self-medication, they were all instantly removed in my moment that I returned. Since my moment of return, I have been clean and sober now well over 32 years. Having now helped countless of numbers of alcoholics, drug addicts, sex addicts, gamblers, and a number of others suffering from other types of symptoms resulting from their addictions, I have found peace. Between 1986 and 2010, the beast in me was once again returned to its cage. In the spring of 1987, I married my second wife. That resulted in the birth of two wonderful children, a boy and a girl. Once again, everything that was lost was regained as I started to become responsible for the first time in my life. I became a man of service to others, and my life became blessed. After 7 years of faithful service to others and my wife, she left me for another man. I had 9 years of sobriety, a beautiful family, and found myself standing on top of a rail in the middle of the night on a bridge, wanting to jump 1,400 feet to my demise. In that moment, a little voice in my head asked, "What about your children?" I then saddled up and became a workaholic in the pursuit of more money. I had once again lost sight of everything that was important. After my second divorce, I decided to hunker down and focus on making more money. I figured I was better off being lonely and rich than broken, beaten down by life. How I survived the next few years without drinking or returning to drugs is still a mystery, more like a miracle. My only companion was my commitment to work. Then out of nowhere, when I wasn't looking, the love of my life appeared. I had found not only a friend, but someone who understood me and the man I truly was. I would soon marry for the third time. After all, the third time's the charm. Over the next 7 years, once again proved to be fabulous. We were both hardworking and committed to helping others, and we were less than fortunate. Then, that's right, you guessed it, we separated, and we decided to get a divorce despite my best efforts. I decided to close my company and to retire. I was done with living and sick and tired of being sick and tired. Now in my 60s, divorced for the third time, I finally figured out what my problem was. It was me. I had a thinking disorder. Most other people would call mental illness. When you're in your 60s with type 2 diabetes and find yourself without medical insurance, you got a problem. Having never spoken to the VA since their cavalier response, "There's nothing we can do for a guy like you," I humbly found myself going to the VA and asking for help. Over the next several months, I sought out both medical and mental health services to better understand what was happening to me. During that process, I witnessed the brokenness of the young men and women with physical and emotional injuries that made Vietnam look like a picnic. My third retirement would not be possible as long as they were suffering. Part 3 of this episode, what it's like now. Sick and tired of being sick and tired, I became determined to find a solution to this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body and the use of medications. The Western medical model was limited to solving problems based upon symptoms being exhibited by both physical signs and behavior. I was not. What if, instead of dealing with the symptoms from the solution to the problem, we looked at the cause and the symptom? What causes this? What is it in me, despite my best efforts? So instead, in 2010, of retiring, I formed a new game of life. I decided to invent a new game. The game would be played from the point of view of a new paradigm where profit would not be measured in the form of money, but rather in the form of results achieved. The zero-sum game of winners and losers is part of the existing paradigm that created the problem in the first place. This paradigm is grounded in competition rather than collaboration. According to Einstein and today's science, one cannot solve a problem from the paradigm in which it was created. In 2010, I was officially rated as a 100% permanently disabled veteran, diagnosed with PTSD, TBI, and a half a dozen other medical disorders that should have landed me dead a long time ago. And they were all directly associated with my military service. In 2011, I created Pathways for Veterans, a nonprofit, to provide research and funding to provide relief from the symptoms of our society calls PTSD. And so what I did is I redefined PTSD. Our society defines PTSD as post-traumatic stress disorder. In plain English, past or post, after an event. Traumatic means an emotional, disturbing, or distressing event. Stress means a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. Disorder means a state of confusion. During my early research, I said to myself, if I'm to survive this hopeless state of mind and body without drugs, I must first change my definition of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I did. My new definition of post-traumatic stress disorder was much simpler. Past trauma stated differently. I cannot change the facts of what happened during the events in the killing fields of Vietnam. I can, however, change the meaning I gave to those events and what happened. Collaboration is the key to this new Pathways paradigm called the Genesis of Change. The Genesis of Change is scheduled for release in the spring of 2020. During the creation of the Genesis Change, my personal transformation from the sickness that resided in my soul was released. Shortly after that release, I was given a second chance with my wife, and we got remarried. Since then, Pathways for Veterans has continued creating collaborative relationships with some of the world's top alternative healers and modalities, along with cutting-edge science to provide relief from these symptoms of anxiety, stress, and insomnia. If you are a veteran, a family member of a veteran, or you know a veteran who might benefit from our free services, contact Pathways for Veterans. Pathways is responsible when any veteran anywhere reaches out. We want our hands to be there. That is it. That's why we exist. For me personally, the profound privilege that I have as not only the founder, but the executive director has been the best experience of all the experiences in my life. Watching the light come on in these young men and women who are so far gone. We call it in service the China stare. We have no idea for some of them if they'll ever come back, but the possibility to provide them simple solutions to relief from these terrible symptoms and afflictions that they have, having served their country, we can do no less. You know, for those of you who are not familiar with a lot of the work that I speak of, please go to one of our websites. All of the services that we provide at Pathways for Veterans, Good Day to Die, and things that are made available to the veteran and their families is extraordinary. And these are all gifts that were given to us by some of the most talented people on the planet, both in the world of academia and also in the world of science. So help and solutions are there. So please, having watched this, reach out and thank a veteran for their service. Veterans are not interested in our opinions. What veterans want most is to have an experience of being heard. And I'm honored that I'm able to come here and speak on behalf of Pathways and the veteran community in hopes that they will come and find a way to share their story in hopes of helping another who still suffers. Thank you. and good evening.